The flight that changed everything. Tanya had been looking forward to this trip for weeks, a well-deserved vacation after months of non-stop work. She had meticulously planned everything. Her hotel was booked, her itinerary was set, and her flight from New York to Miami was supposed to be a seamless start to her much-needed break. As she walked through the airport, rolling her suitcase beside her, she glanced at the boarding pass on her phone. Seat 14A, window seat. Perfect. The airport buzzed with life. Travelers rushing to their gates, families embracing in emotional goodbyes, flight announcements echoing through the intercom. Tanya sighed, relieved that her flight was on time. The boarding process was smooth at first. Passengers shuffled into the cabin, placing their carry-ons in the overhead compartments. Tanya moved through the narrow aisle, her heart racing slightly with anticipation. Miami meant sun, beaches, and relaxation. It was going to be a great trip. But as she reached row 14, her smile faded. Someone was already sitting in her seat. A young woman, probably in her early 20s, was comfortably seated in 14A, earphones in, eyes glued to her phone. Tanya hesitated, double-checking her boarding pass. Yes, 14A. Excuse me, Tanya said politely. The woman didn't respond. Tanya tried again, this time tapping her shoulder lightly. The woman finally looked up, removing one earphone. Yeah, I think you're in my seat, Tanya said, showing her boarding pass. The woman sighed dramatically, as if Tanya had just ruined her entire day. Oh, really? Let me check. She pulled out her own boarding pass, frowning. Oh, mine says 14B. I guess I got mixed up. My bad. Tanya smiled politely. No worries, it happens. The woman slid over to her correct seat, and Tanya settled into her window spot. She let out a breath of relief. A minor inconvenience, nothing to stress over. Then, just as she was buckling her seatbelt, a shadow loomed over her. Excuse me, a sharp voice said. Tanya looked up and saw a flight attendant standing over her, a tall woman with neatly tied-back blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. Her uniform was crisp, her name tag reading Lisa. Tanya frowned in confusion. Yes. Lisa's arms were crossed. Are you sure you're in the right seat? Tanya blinked, taken aback by the tone. But yes, 14A. Lisa sighed, clearly impatient. I don't think so. The passenger here had this seat. Tanya furrowed her brows. No, there was just a mix-up. She had 14B, but sat in my seat by accident. We figured it out. Lisa's expression darkened. Ma'am, you need to check your ticket again. Tanya felt her frustration rising. I already did. This is my seat. Passengers in the surrounding rows began to glance over, sensing tension. The woman in 14B, now clearly uncomfortable, whispered, Yeah, it was my mistake. She has the right seat. Lisa barely acknowledged her. I need you to move. Tanya stiffened. Move where? This is my assigned seat. Lisa let out an exaggerated sigh, rolling her eyes. Just switch to any open seat, ma'am. It's not that big of a deal. Tanya felt her stomach tighten. Why was she acting like this? I'm sorry, but I booked this seat specifically. I'd like to stay here, Tanya said, keeping her voice calm. Lisa's eyes narrowed. You don't get to pick and choose seats at random. Tanya clenched her jaw. I'm not. I reserved this seat when I booked my flight. Lisa let out a huff, placing a hand on her hip. Well, now we have an issue, don't we? At this point, people in the surrounding rows were openly staring. Tanya could feel the weight of their gazes. She hated causing a scene, but she wasn't going to be bullied into giving up a seat she had rightfully booked. Can I speak to a supervisor? Tanya asked, keeping her tone as measured as possible. Lisa's lips pressed into a thin line. No, there's no need for that. Well, I think there is, Tanya shot back. You're asking me to move without any valid reason. Lisa's expression twisted into something bordering on disdain. You people always think you're entitled to special treatment. she muttered under her breath. Tanya's eyes widened. What did she just say? A couple of passengers nearby gasped. One man leaned forward, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. A woman 2 rows ahead turned in her seat, eyes flickering between Tanya and Lisa. Lisa, realizing that others had heard her, quickly straightened her posture. Look, just cooperate, and we can avoid making this a problem. Tanya felt a fire ignite inside her. She wasn't usually one to argue, but this wasn't okay. You just said something incredibly inappropriate, Tanya said, her voice firmer now. Lisa's face hardened. Excuse me? You heard me. And I'd like to speak to your manager now. Lisa scoffed, crossing her arms again. Ma'am, if you don't comply, I'll have to escalate this. Tanya let out a humorless laugh. Oh, please do. I'd love to see how that plays out. The tension in the cabin was thick. Some passengers had pulled out their phones, discreetly recording. Others whispered amongst themselves. Lisa glared at Tanya for a long moment before turning on her heel. Fine. I'll get my supervisor. But don't think you're getting away with this. She stormed down the aisle, disappearing toward the front of the plane. Tanya took a shaky breath, trying to steady her racing heart. What just happened? The woman in 14B leaned closer. I'm really sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Tanya shook her head. It's not your fault. The man in the row behind them spoke up. That was insane. She had no reason to act like that. Another woman across the aisle nodded. And did she really just say what I think she did? Tanya exhaled. Yeah, she did. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. Then suddenly, the cockpit door opened. A senior airline official, dressed in a neatly pressed navy blue uniform, stepped out. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were locked onto Lisa as she stood next to him. Passengers held their breath. And then, in a voice that was loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, the man turned to Lisa and said something that made everyone freeze. Pack your things. You're off this flight. Lisa's face drained of color. The entire plane went silent. Tanya's heart pounded in her chest. What just happened? And why was Lisa being fired right there on the spot? The flight that became a spectacle. The words, pack your things. You're off this flight, hung in the air like an explosion no one had seen coming. The cabin was dead silent, passengers holding their breath as the senior airline official, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a no-nonsense expression, stood firm in front of Lisa. The tension was thick, suffocating. Lisa, who just moments ago had been standing with unshakable arrogance, suddenly looked like she had been punched in the gut. Her mouth fell open, her cheeks turned pale, and her hands trembled as she stammered, "Do you what?" The official, whose name tag read Robert, didn't even blink. His voice was calm but firm, the kind of tone that made it clear there was no room for negotiation. I said, pack your things. You are no longer working this flight. Lisa's face twisted in a mix of shock and fury. You can't be serious. This is ridiculous. She pointed aggressively at Tanya, is the one causing trouble. Tanya's breath caught in her throat, but before she could speak, Robert cut in. Enough. I've already reviewed the reports from other attendants and passenger statements. I've seen enough to make my decision. Lisa's eyes darted around the plane, searching for some kind of support, but she found nothing. The passengers were staring at her, some with their phones recording, others with looks of silent disapproval. The reality hit her like a brick wall. She had no allies here. She was alone. Lisa's lips quivered. Wait, hold on. Robert wasn't interested in hearing excuses. If you do not leave voluntarily, security will escort you out. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. At that moment, Lisa's posture crumbled. The confidence, the authority, the entitlement, all of it evaporated. Slowly, she grabbed her flight attendant bag from the storage unit and turned toward the exit. Tanya could hear the hushed murmurs ripple through the cabin as Lisa walked toward the front of the plane. Some passengers were shaking their heads. Others were whispering in disbelief. But the most unnerving thing, Lisa never looked back. She just walked off. And with that, she was gone. The aftershock. The moment the plane door closed behind Lisa, it was like a weight had been lifted. The entire cabin exhaled at once, the tension easing just a little. Passengers turned to each other, exchanging looks. Some whispered under their breath. Others tapped away on their phones, no doubt posting about what had just happened. Tanya's heart was still racing. Had that just happened? Had she really just witnessed a flight attendant getting fired on the spot? She wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, Lisa had been rude, aggressive, and unprofessional. On the other hand, losing her job like that, right there in front of everyone. A twinge of discomfort settled in Tanya's stomach. She hadn't wanted anyone to get fired. She just wanted her seat. A soft voice broke through her thoughts. "Are you okay?" Tanya turned to see the woman from 14B, the one who had accidentally sat in her seat earlier. Tanya let out a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. I don't even know. That escalated so fast. The woman nodded. "Yeah, I mean, she kind of brought it on herself, didn't she?" Tanya sighed. "I guess, but getting fired, that's intense." From behind them, a man in the next row spoke up. Honestly, she had it coming. Tanya looked back at him, surprised by how matter-of-fact he sounded. "You think so?" she asked. The man shrugged. "I fly a lot for work. I've dealt with rude attendants before, but that was next level." She was on a power trip. And then that comment she made. He shook his head. Unacceptable. Tanya bit her lip. She had replayed that moment in her head too. You people always think you're entitled to special treatment. She knew exactly what Lisa had meant by that. And so did everyone else. Social media erupts. Just as Tanya was trying to process everything, she felt a buzz in her pocket. Her phone. She pulled it out, only to see notifications flooding in, one after another. Someone had tagged her in a post. Then another. And another. Her stomach dropped. Oh no. She tapped on one of the notifications and found herself staring at a video. A video of the entire incident. Already uploaded. Already getting thousands of views. Her hands trembled as she pressed play. The video started midway through the argument, right at the part where Lisa snapped at her. Tanya watched in disbelief as the footage captured everything. Lisa's rude behavior, the dismissive attitude, the racially charged comment. And then, of course, the final moment where Robert fired her. In real time, Tanya could see the likes, comments, and shares skyrocketing. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just an incident anymore. This was going viral. The reaction begins. She scrolled through the comments. That flight attendant deserved it. You can't talk to people like that and expect no consequences. Lisa thought she was untouchable. Karma hit her faster than the plane could take off. Did y'all hear what she said, though? That "you people" comment was coded AF. She knew what she was doing. Tanya handled that like a queen. Imagine keeping your cool while getting treated like that. Justice was served. Tanya's breath caught in her throat. This was too much. It wasn't just a flight drama anymore. It was a full-blown internet spectacle. Her hands were clammy as she locked her phone and stared out the window, trying to breathe. She had just wanted to get to Miami. Instead, she had just become the center of a viral controversy, and there was no going back now. A storm is brewing. The flight finally took off, but Tanya could barely focus. She felt exposed, vulnerable. Yes, she had been in the right. Yes, Lisa had been wrong. But now, her face, her name, her story were all over the internet. How long before reporters reached out? How long before someone twisted the story into something else? She swallowed hard, staring at the tiny window as the plane soared through the sky. Somewhere out there, Lisa was probably realizing what had just happened. Somewhere out there, people were talking about Tanya. And whether she liked it or not, this was only the beginning. The viral storm takes off. Tanya sat in her seat, staring out the window as the plane cruised through the sky. But she wasn't looking at the clouds. Her mind was racing. Her phone buzzed again, another notification piling onto the hundreds that had already flooded in. She didn't even want to look. This was getting out of control. Just hours ago, she was just another traveler heading to Miami for a relaxing getaway. Now she was the center of a controversy that was spreading like wildfire. She unlocked her phone hesitantly, scrolling through the notifications. Her face was on news articles. Her name was in hashtags. Her situation was being discussed by thousands of strangers online. Passenger stands her ground after flight attendant crosses the line. Internet takes her side. Airline staffer fired after viral altercation. Was it justified? Did this flight attendant deserve to lose her job? Debate rages on. Everywhere she looked, there were reactions, opinions, debates. Some people saw her as a hero. Others, they were already trying to tear her down. The internet reacts. Tanya scrolled through the Twitter thread that had blown up overnight. There were thousands of retweets, thousands of likes, and even more heated arguments in the comments. That flight attendant was way out of line. Tanya handled that like a queen. If Lisa had treated a white passenger like that, no way she would have kept her job. It's crazy how people in power think they can treat others like trash and get away with it. I don't care what y'all say. Firing her was way too much. This could have been handled better. People get fired every day for acting unprofessional. Why should flight attendants be any different? Tanya's stomach twisted as she came across comments attacking her. Why does everything have to turn into a racial thing? Maybe she was just rude. The passenger should have just taken another seat. No need to make a scene. She just ruined someone's career over a seat mix-up. Pathetic. Lisa was having a bad day, and now she's jobless. Overreacting much. Tanya clenched her phone. She wanted to scream. A bad day. They thought this was about a bad day. Lisa didn't just have a bad day. She humiliated her, disrespected her, and tried to gaslight her in front of a plane full of people. And yet, some people still thought Tanya was the villain. She exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay calm. A message from an unexpected source. Just as Tanya was about to put her phone away, a new notification popped up. A direct message. From someone unexpected. Her eyes widened when she saw the name. Lisa. Lisa had messaged her. Her heart skipped a beat. She stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the message, debating whether to open it. What could Lisa possibly have to say? A threat? An apology? A desperate plea? Curiosity got the best of her, and she tapped the message. The text was short, but it was loaded with emotion. Are you happy now? You got what you wanted. I hope you can sleep at night. Tanya's jaw clenched. Her pulse pounded as she read the message over and over again. Her stomach turned with a mix of anger and disbelief. Was Lisa serious right now? After everything she had done, the attitude, the insults, the abuse of power, she had the nerve to act like Tanya was the bad guy. Tanya gripped her phone, furious. She wanted to type back, I didn't get you fired. You did that to yourself. She wanted to say, maybe if you treated people with respect, you wouldn't be in this situation. But she didn't. Instead, she locked her phone and shoved it into her bag. She wasn't going to give Lisa the satisfaction of a response. Let her sit with her own actions. The airline responds. A chime rang over the airplane speakers, and the captain's voice came through. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be arriving in Miami shortly. We'd like to thank you for flying with us today. Tanya sighed, relieved that the flight was almost over. But just as she was about to relax, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just another Twitter notification. It was a statement from the airline. We are aware of the incident that took place on Flight 227 from New York to Miami, involving one of our flight attendants and a passenger. We take matters of professionalism and customer service very seriously. After reviewing the evidence, the employee in question is no longer with the airline. We apologize to the passenger affected and assure our customers that we remain committed to respectful and professional service. Tanya's eyes widened. It was official. Lisa wasn't just removed from the flight. She was fired from the airline. A part of Tanya felt relieved. Lisa's behavior was unacceptable, and she needed to face the consequences. But another part of her felt uneasy. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was bigger than her. This was public now. A full-blown controversy. Touchdown in Miami. The plane touched down at Miami International Airport, but Tanya wasn't thinking about the beach anymore. She was thinking about what would happen next. The internet was already on fire. The airline had issued a statement. Lisa was reaching out to her. And she was now at the center of a story that wasn't going away anytime soon. As passengers began gathering their belongings, the woman from 14B turned to her again. "You okay?" Tanya forced a smile. "Yeah, just a lot to process." The woman nodded, understanding. "Just remember, you didn't do anything wrong. People like her always think they can get away with it, until they don't." Tanya took a deep breath. She knew this was only the beginning. When she stepped off this plane, the real storm was waiting for her. The storm outside the airport. As soon as Tanya stepped off the plane and into the bustling Miami airport, the weight of reality crashed down on her. Her phone was vibrating nonstop. People were staring at her. Some subtly whispered as they walked by. Others boldly pulled out their phones, recording her. Tanya's chest tightened. This was surreal. She hadn't asked for this attention. She hadn't wanted to become a viral spectacle. She was just a woman trying to get to Miami. Now she was the passenger in that video. Social media turns into a battlefield. As Tanya navigated through the airport, she finally gave in and checked her phone again. Her name was everywhere. Hashtag Justice for Tanya was trending. So was hashtag Fire Lisa and hashtag Airline Scandal. Every news outlet was covering the story. Passenger stands up to racist flight attendant. Justice served. Airline scandal. Employee fired for misconduct after shocking viral video. Lisa speaks out, claims she was set up and unfairly targeted. Tanya froze. Lisa spoke out. Her heart pounded as she scrolled until she found a live interview. Lisa was sitting in front of a news anchor, her expression pitiful, her eyes red-rimmed. It was blown out of proportion. Lisa said, her voice trembling, "I was just trying to do my job. I never meant any harm." Tanya's stomach dropped. No. Lisa was trying to play the victim. The interview that changed everything. Lisa continued, "I've been with the airline for 10 years. I've never had a complaint like this before. I was under stress that day. I was exhausted. But I never meant to be disrespectful." The anchor nodded, "But the video shows you making a racially charged comment. Do you regret that?" Lisa sighed dramatically. "I didn't mean it that way. It was just a misunderstanding." Tanya's grip on her phone tightened. Misunderstanding. That wasn't a misunderstanding. She had seen the look in Lisa's eyes when she said, "You people always think you're entitled to special treatment." She knew what Lisa had meant. Lisa knew what she had meant. But now she was twisting the story, making it seem like Tanya had overreacted. A shocking turn. Tanya wasn't naive. She knew how the internet worked. At first, everyone was on her side. But now that Lisa was playing the victim, the narrative was shifting. She scrolled through the comments under the interview. Maybe firing her was too much. It was just a misunderstanding. People are way too sensitive these days. Tanya made a scene over nothing. Lisa apologized. What more do you want? This is cancel culture at its worst. Tanya felt sick. It was happening. People were starting to turn on her. She locked her phone, her pulse pounding in her ears. Lisa had been fired for a reason. She wasn't the victim. But the world. The world loved to flip the script. A stranger steps in. Tanya's hands were shaking as she approached the baggage claim. She needed air. She needed to breathe. Just as she was about to step outside, someone tapped her on the shoulder. "Excuse me." Tanya turned sharply, startled. It was a young black woman, probably in her early 20s, wearing a college sweatshirt. She looked nervous but determined. "Sorry," the woman said quickly. I just wanted to say what happened on that plane. It wasn't right. I saw the video. And She took a deep breath. "I just wanted to say, I'm glad you stood your ground." Tanya blinked, surprised. The young woman hesitated. "I work in customer service. I've had people talk to me the way Lisa talked to you, and it sucks, because you can't fight back. You can't speak up, or you're being difficult. But you did. And you made them listen." Tanya felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. "Thank you," Tanya said softly. The young woman smiled. "Don't let the internet get to you. You did the right thing." And just like that, she was gone. Tanya watched her disappear into the crowd, feeling a little less alone. The news crew waiting outside. She should have known it wouldn't be that easy. As soon as Tanya stepped outside the airport, she saw them. Reporters, cameras, people waiting for her. Someone shouted, "Tanya, over here." Flashes went off. Oh no. Her body tensed. She wasn't ready for this. But the reporters weren't going to wait. "Tanya, do you have a response to Lisa's interview? Do you think Lisa deserved to be fired? Some people say you overreacted. What do you say to them?" Tanya felt her head spin. What was she supposed to say? She hadn't prepared for this. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't a politician. She was just a woman who wanted to go on vacation. And now the whole world was watching. The breaking point. The flashes. The cameras. The shouting. It was too much. Tanya snapped. "You want a statement," she said, her voice shaking. The reporters went silent. "Fine. Here's my statement." She took a deep breath, then said loud and clear, "Lisa didn't get fired because of me. She got fired because of her own actions. She disrespected a passenger. She refused to do her job. And she made a disgusting comment. That's why she lost her job." The reporters scribbled furiously. The cameras zoomed in. Tanya wasn't done. And now she wants to play the victim. To act like this is all my fault. No, I won't let her. Actions have consequences. And maybe if she had treated people with respect, she'd still have her job today. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. But Tanya had spoken her truth, and she wasn't taking it back. She turned on her heel and walked away, her heart pounding. She didn't stop until she was far, far from the flashing lights. A new reality. As she collapsed into the backseat of a cab, Tanya felt the exhaustion hit her all at once. This was her new reality now. People were going to talk. People were going to argue. People were going to choose who they believed. But Tanya, she was done defending herself. The truth was already out there. Lisa had dug her own grave. And Tanya, she was finally going to enjoy her vacation, whether the internet liked it or not. The war of perception. The cab ride from the airport should have been peaceful, a moment for Tanya to decompress and escape the chaos waiting for her outside the terminal. But instead, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. New headlines, more interviews, and the public battle for the truth was only getting louder. Tanya sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. She had never wanted this. She just wanted a seat on a plane. Not a nationwide debate. A new threat emerges. She was about to put her phone on airplane mode, just to get some peace when a new message popped up. This one. It made her stomach drop. It was from a blocked number. You ruined her life. I hope you're proud of yourself. Tanya's breath caught. Then, another message. Women like you always play the victim. But we know the truth. Her hands trembled. Then, another. Watch your back. You're not as innocent as you think you are. Tanya froze. What the hell? This wasn't just online trolls anymore. This was a threat. The reality of going viral. Tanya locked her phone, her heart pounding. This was what happened when something went too viral. It wasn't just about internet debates anymore. Now it was personal. People had chosen sides. And some were angry enough to send threats. She swallowed hard, staring out the cab window as the city lights of Miami blurred past. She was supposed to be relaxing on a beach right now. Instead, she was looking over her shoulder. A friend's advice. As soon as she checked into her hotel, Tanya immediately called her best friend, Mia. Mia answered on the first ring. Girl, I've been waiting for you to call. Are you okay? Tanya sank onto the hotel bed, exhaling. No, not really. Mia didn't hesitate. I saw the Lisa interview. I wanted to throw my damn phone across the room. Tanya let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, she's making it seem like I ruined her life. Mia scoffed. She ruined her own damn life. All you did was stand up for yourself. But now she's playing the poor me card. Tanya ran a hand through her hair. People are sending me threats now. Mia. Threats. Silence. Then Maya's voice turned serious. Tanya, you need to be careful. Block unknown numbers. Stay off social media. And for God's sake, don't go anywhere alone. Tanya's chest tightened. Was this really her life now? Mia continued, her voice softer. Listen, you did the right thing. You know that, right? Tanya sighed. I think so. Mia didn't hesitate. No, you know so. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. You didn't cause this. Lisa did. Tanya closed her eyes. She wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. But with everything spiraling out of control, it was getting harder and harder to remember the truth. The internet never forgets. The next morning, Tanya made the mistake of checking her phone again. The internet had only gotten worse overnight. Now, there were think pieces written about her. Some supported her. Some were twisting the narrative even further. Did the airline act too fast? Was Lisa unfairly targeted? The rise of victim culture. Was this really racism or just a bad day? What really happened on Flight 227? A deeper look. Tanya wanted to scream. People were arguing about her life as if it was some reality show drama. As if she wasn't a real person. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. From a name she didn't recognize. Hi Tanya, I'm a producer from Good Morning America. We'd love to have you on the show to share your side of the story. Please let us know if you're interested. Tanya stared at the screen. Now the media wanted her. This was officially out of control. A difficult choice. She had two options. Stay quiet, let the story run its course, and hope people moved on. Speak up. Go on TV. Tell her side. Defend herself before Lisa's version became the only one people believed. Tanya's heart pounded. If she spoke up, the attention would get worse. More threats. More trolls. More headlines. But if she stayed silent, Lisa's manipulated version of the truth would be the only truth people heard. Her pulse quickened. She had never asked for this fight. But maybe it was time to stop running. The decision that changed everything. Later that day, Tanya called the producer back. Hi, this is Tanya. A pause. Yes, I'd like to come on the show. She exhaled. Let's set it up. And just like that, the battle for the truth had officially begun. What happens next? Tanya had made her choice. But she had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side. Would the world believe her? Or had Lisa's damage already been done? One thing was certain. This fight was far from over. Tanya speaks out. The morning of the interview came faster than Tanya had expected. She barely slept the night before, her mind spinning with everything that could go wrong. What if people didn't believe her? What if she made things worse? The producer had arranged for a car to pick her up and take her to the studio. Tanya stared out the window during the drive, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't what she wanted. She never planned to become a public figure. When she arrived at the studio, a wave of anxiety washed over her. The set was bright, the cameras already set up, and the producers buzzing around with clipboards and headsets. They greeted her warmly, offered her coffee, and showed her to a makeup chair. Everything felt so surreal. Just keep calm. Tell the truth. That's all you need to do. But as she sat there under the lights, Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that her every move, every word, would be dissected by millions. Facing the public. When the segment started, the host leaned forward with a warm smile, her voice calm and inviting. Tanya, thank you for joining us. This whole situation has become such a major topic of discussion, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share your side of the story. Tanya nodded, taking a steadying breath. Thank you for having me. The host's voice softened. Can you tell us in your own words what happened that day on the flight? Tanya hesitated for just a moment, then began. It started out as a simple misunderstanding over a seat. I had reserved a window seat, but when I got there, another passenger was already sitting there by mistake. We sorted it out between us, but that's when the flight attendant got involved. And instead of helping, she became hostile. The host's expression shifted to concern. What do you mean by hostile? Tanya folded her hands in her lap. She spoke to me as if I'd done something wrong, even though I hadn't. She made comments that felt personal. When I tried to explain what had happened, she dismissed me, raised her voice, and eventually made a remark that... Tanya paused, swallowing. That felt racially charged. It was unprofessional and deeply upsetting. The host nodded. That's the part that has sparked so much discussion. People saw the video, they heard that comment, and it struck a nerve. How did it feel in that moment to hear those words? Tanya's voice wavered slightly. It felt humiliating. I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. I just wanted what I paid for. But the way she spoke to me, it felt like she was saying I didn't belong. Like I didn't have the same right to respect as everyone else on that plane. And that hurt. The host let the moment breathe before asking, and when she was fired, what was your reaction to that? Tanya sighed. It all happened so fast. I never intended for anyone to lose their job. I just wanted the issue resolved. But when I heard the manager dismiss her, I was shocked. I didn't expect it to escalate like that. And honestly, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I still feel conflicted about the outcome. The audience responds. As Tanya spoke, clips of the viral video played on the screen behind her. The footage showed the heated exchange, Lisa's sharp words, and the moment the airline manager stepped in. People watching from home took to social media in real time. Some applauded Tanya's courage, while others questioned whether the situation had gone too far. She's so well-spoken and calm. I believe her 100%. Lisa's comment was completely inappropriate. Tanya is handling this with grace. I get that it was unprofessional, but did she really deserve to be fired? Seems harsh. Tanya's side of the story makes sense. Lisa messed up, plain and simple. The online debate reignited with new fervor. This time, however, Tanya's voice was finally being heard. The host's final question. As the interview neared its end, the host leaned forward. Tanya, you've shown a lot of composure through all of this. What do you hope people take away from your story? Tanya met the host's gaze, her voice steady. I hope people understand that this was never about revenge or wanting someone fired. It was about standing up for myself when I was treated unfairly. I hope it reminds people that respect and professionalism matter, no matter the situation. And I hope it encourages others who feel dismissed or marginalized to speak up, even when it's difficult." The host smiled warmly. "Thank you, Tanya. We appreciate you coming on today." Tanya nodded. "Thank you." The cameras stopped rolling, and the producers rushed over to thank her again. Tanya felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The hard part was over, but she knew the conversation wasn't done. Backlash and support. The interview quickly went viral, trending on every major platform. People praised Tanya for her poise and honesty. Others continued to debate whether Lisa's firing was warranted. News outlets ran follow-up segments. Panelists argued about whether the airline's response had been too extreme. Comment sections overflowed with heated exchanges. But amidst the noise, something else started to happen. People who had experienced similar situations, being spoken down to, dismissed, or treated unfairly, began sharing their own stories. Hashtags like #StandWithTanya and #RespectPassengers started trending. More and more people called for better training, more accountability, and a renewed focus on professionalism in customer service industries. Tanya's personal growth. For Tanya, it was overwhelming. But as the days passed, she began to find a sense of peace. The interview had been a turning point. She had spoken her truth, and people had listened. She still received the occasional hateful message, but those no longer carried the same weight. She knew who she was, and she knew what had happened. No one could take that from her. A new beginning. Eventually, the media storm started to fade. Other stories took its place in the headlines. The online debate cooled. Tanya finally began to enjoy her time in Miami. She walked on the beach, took in the sunsets, and reconnected with herself. When she returned home, her friends greeted her with hugs and encouragement. "Tanya," Maya said, "you handled all of this better than anyone I know. You stood your ground and kept your dignity. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Tanya smiled. "Thanks, Mia. I think I'd finally understand that now." And for the first time in weeks, Tanya felt like herself again. Not a viral sensation, not a trending hashtag, just Tanya. And that was more than enough. Life after the headlines. Weeks had passed since the interview, since the peak of the media storm that had turned Tanya's life upside down. The online frenzy had cooled, replaced by the next big story. Some celebrity scandal, a viral video of a bear wandering into a convenience store, or whatever else captured the internet's short attention span. For most people, Tanya's story was already old news. But for Tanya, the experience was far from over. She carried it with her, not just as a memory, but as a turning point, a moment when she learned just how complicated and unpredictable life could be. A new kind of normal. Returning to her daily routine wasn't as simple as flipping a switch. Everywhere she went, she felt like someone might recognize her. A casual glance from a stranger on the train. It felt loaded. A friendly smile from the barista at her favorite coffee shop. She found herself wondering if they'd seen the video. But for the most part, people didn't bring it up. Those who knew her, friends, co-workers, family, had already had their say. And as supportive as they'd been, Tanya wasn't eager to keep reliving the incident. She wanted to move forward. Her job at the marketing agency was still there, and in many ways, it was her refuge. Work was a space where she could focus on projects, deadlines, and ideas instead of what had happened on that flight. Slowly, she began to feel like herself again, the confident, ambitious woman she had always been. Unfinished business. One afternoon, as Tanya was catching up on emails at her desk, her phone buzzed. She glanced down, half expecting it to be another promotional email or a reminder about an upcoming meeting. Instead, it was a notification she hadn't expected. A message from the airline. Tanya hesitated before opening it. She hadn't heard from them since they issued their official statement weeks ago. What more could they have to say? When she finally read the email, her brow furrowed. "Dear Ms. Grant, We would like to invite you to participate in a passenger experience panel we are organizing. This panel will help us better understand the needs and concerns of our customers so that we can prevent situations like the one you experienced. Your feedback would be invaluable." Tanya stared at the screen. They wanted her to join a panel, to talk about her experience. She wasn't sure how to feel. On one hand, she appreciated that the airline was trying to learn from the incident. On the other hand, part of her wanted to just leave it all behind. A hard choice. Tanya spent the rest of the day mulling it over. Do I really want to go back there? The thought of sitting down with airline representatives, rehashing everything, and putting herself in that position again wasn't exactly appealing. But at the same time, what if she could make a difference? What if her story could lead to better training, more respectful policies, and a system that prevented another passenger from going through what she had? By the time she left work that evening, she had made her decision. I'll do it. The panel. The panel was held in a conference room at the airline's headquarters. Tanya arrived early, nerves jangling. She had no idea what to expect. Inside, the room was set up with a long table, a handful of airline executives seated on one side, and a few passengers, including Tanya, on the other. There were notebooks, pens, and a moderator standing at the front of the room. "Thank you all for coming," the moderator began. "We're here to have an open, honest discussion about passenger experiences and what we can do to improve them. We understand that mistakes were made in the past, and we want to learn from them." Tanya listened carefully as other passengers shared their stories. Some spoke about delayed flights, lost luggage, and other common inconveniences. Then it was Tanya's turn. She took a deep breath, her voice steady. "What happened to me wasn't just about a seat mix-up. It was about respect. It was about being treated with dignity, even when something goes wrong. I wasn't asking for special treatment. I just wanted what I had paid for. And when I tried to explain the situation, I was met with hostility. That's what needs to change." The room was silent for a moment. Then one of the executives nodded. "You're absolutely right. We failed to ensure that our staff handled the situation appropriately. And that's on us. We've implemented new training programs and are reviewing our policies to make sure this doesn't happen again." Tanya felt a small sense of relief. Maybe this could actually make a difference. Moving on. For real this time. When the panel ended, one of the executives approached Tanya. "I just wanted to thank you personally," he said. "It's not easy to come back and talk about something like this, but your input will help us create a better experience for everyone." Tanya nodded. "I appreciate that. I just hope it leads to real change." As she left the headquarters, she felt lighter. It wasn't that the panel had erased what happened, but it had given her a sense of closure. She had spoken her truth, and it had been heard. A brighter future. In the months that followed, Tanya noticed subtle changes in the way she carried herself. She was more assertive when she needed to be, less afraid to speak up if something felt wrong. The incident on that flight had shown her that she could handle pressure, stand her ground, and come out the other side stronger. She also became more aware of how she treated others. On planes, in stores, at work. She knew firsthand how damaging disrespect could be, and she made a conscious effort to approach every interaction with kindness and understanding. Life slowly returned to normal, but Tanya had grown in ways she hadn't anticipated. She wasn't just the woman from the viral video anymore. She was Tanya Grant, strong, resilient, and ready for whatever came next. And as she boarded a plane for her next trip, she smiled to herself. This time, she knew she'd be just fine. The final flight. Months turned into a year. Tanya's life quietly found its rhythm again. The story that once dominated the headlines faded into the background, becoming little more than an anecdote brought up at the occasional dinner party or family gathering. But to Tanya, it wasn't just an anecdote. It was a turning point. She had spent so much time in the aftermath of that incident feeling conflicted about what happened to Lisa, about her own role, and about how quickly the public could both support and condemn her. But as time passed, she realized something profound. She had been shaped by it, but not defined by it. The invitation. One day, Tanya received an unexpected call from the airline. "Ms. Grant," said the voice on the other end. "As you may know, it's been a year since we implemented the new passenger experience initiatives, many of which were inspired by your input during the panel. We'd like to invite you to join us on a special flight to mark the anniversary of those changes." Tanya was taken aback. "A special flight?" "Yes," the representative continued. "It's a symbolic gesture, really. We're flying from New York to Miami, on the same route as last year. Some of the executives, members of our cabin crew, and a few others who helped improve our policies will be on board. We'd be honored if you joined us." Tanya hesitated. Part of her wanted to decline. She wasn't sure she wanted to relive that trip. But another part of her, an increasingly confident and reflective part, thought, why not? Boarding the flight. When Tanya arrived at the airport, it felt like déjà vu. The same terminal, the same check-in counters. But this time, it was different. As she boarded the plane, the flight attendants greeted her with warm smiles. There was no confusion over her seat assignment, no tension in the air, just the hum of engines and the gentle rustle of passengers settling in. She found her seat -14 again and sat down by the window. The sunlight streamed in, casting a warm glow over her lap. It felt peaceful. As the plane taxied to the runway, Tanya reflected on how much had changed in the past year. She had grown more resilient, more self-assured. She had found ways to move forward, ways to heal. And perhaps most importantly, she had seen that speaking up, even when it was hard, could lead to something better. In the air. Once the plane was at cruising altitude, the airline CEO stood at the front of the cabin, holding a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you for joining us on this special flight. Today marks a year since we started implementing new policies and training to ensure that every passenger is treated with the respect and dignity they deserve. These changes would not have been possible without the feedback and courage of passengers like Tanya Grant." Tanya's cheeks flushed as people around her turned to look. A few passengers applauded, some smiled, and others simply nodded in quiet recognition. "Ms. Grant," the CEO continued, "your experience taught us a valuable lesson. Because you spoke up, we were able to identify areas where we had failed and work toward meaningful improvement. On behalf of everyone at this airline, thank you." Tanya nodded in return, her emotions a mix of pride and humility. Landing in Miami. When the plane landed, Tanya felt a sense of closure. The flight had come full circle, not just the literal trip from New York to Miami, but the journey she had taken over the past year. As she stepped off the plane and into the Miami sunshine, she felt lighter. The weight of that viral incident was no longer a burden. It was a memory, a lesson, and a chapter that had finally reached its conclusion. Epilogue. Back home, Tanya wrote a short post on her personal blog. "I learned a lot this past year. About people. About conflict. About resilience. But most of all, I learned that speaking up, even when it feels risky, is worth it. Not just for yourself, but for the change it can inspire. Life is full of moments that test us. Sometimes they make us uncomfortable. Sometimes they make us stronger. This was one of mine, and I'm grateful for the growth it brought." With that, Tanya closed her laptop, leaned back in her chair, and smiled.